Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Inevitable Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Pedro, the founder CEO of Atman. We're a close community of founders and investors playing long-term games together. And I'm here with Adhemar, which is a massive honor. Adhemar is the founder and CEO of Kovi, and a company that enables a more efficient, all-inclusive, and flexible car rental for on-demand drivers in LATAM, plus many other things that are in the pipes. That's just a day one plan. And basically, they pioneered, right, an asset-light model in the car rental industry that generates more value for both their partners, suppliers, drivers, and ultimately, you as well. If you have ever been on an Uber or Didi or, basically shared ride. Kovi is backed by leading global investors such as Monashees, Global Founders Capital, ONEVC, Maya, YCombinator, Shift, and so forth. And to date has led, you guys raised over 40 million at this point, right? Again, just in the beginning. And I, met Adhemar because I sourced the opportunity when I was at ONEVC. We're actually introduced by another YCombinator founder, Fancho from Fruana, back when Kovi only had 6 cars, I think. And it's been wonderful to see the evolution thus far. And before that, Adhemar was also general manager at 99 and a strategy consultant at Bain. So we'll talk about all these things during the episode. But also worked at International Paper and BOSCH. But more than just, a tier 1 world-class CEO in the urban mobility space, Adhemar is also a very purpose-driven person, serves as an advisor for multiple early-stage companies, and is married to an incredible woman named Natasha, whom I've had the pleasure to meet a few times. And you guys also have a dog called Simba, which is great. So welcome to the podcast.
That's right. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a great honor to be here with you today. So on my side, I met Pedro during YCombinator and together with ONEVC. It was a perfect match. They moved really fast with such a profound analysis and I mean, with a great purpose also back then and now again at Atman. So it's a great honor to do business together and to be here today. Thank you for the invitation.
That's great. Absolutely. Well, let's go back to your childhood, and start back when you were about 12, and you were living in the U.S. actually, right? Because your father was doing a post doctorate, right?
Yeah, that's right. But so I'll move one step behind my childhood, and I don't know if you are familiar with that. I don't know if I ever told you this, but my mom, she's a social worker. So basically, she graduated as a social worker, and my dad is an engineer. And I will start with my mom before my dad, and then not because I prefer any of those. They're still married and have a great relationship with both. But with my mom, she gave me a bit of a purpose-driven mindset, and she actually found an NGO, which was basically giving women with from 2 years old to 15 years old, basically home. And she basically did this by herself together with, they raised funds. They didn't have any money to do it. She did that for just because of the impact that she had. She did this in Jabuticabal, which is a very small city in the center of São Paulo. And now, more than 20 years later, the organization grew, and now they do also men's or boys. Let's say they have about 30 boys there. So in the beginning of my childhood, I like to say I have many sisters beside my blood sister, who she's now studying to be a lawyer, basically. And yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
and I don't know if I ever told you that before. But
No, I didn't. But now a lot of your kindness and many of the spirituality conversations that we've had during these past few years, they make a lot of sense, right? Because it's that's interesting. So how does it work? Basically, she has an NGO, and it's for kids that are in poverty conditions that just need mentorship and access to education, health. Like, what's the deal?
no, so basically, she, as a social worker, she basically picked up kids that was basically left from their families, and they give her a home. So basically, they had.
So it's an orphanage.
It's an orphanage, exactly. That's a better word in English. It's um orfanato, exatamente. Exactly. And
That's great.
And yeah, and basically, and then she basically did her career. Let's say after that, she became the social secretary of Jabuticabal, and then she became a social secretary for all the mid-sized cities in the state of São Paulo. And then she left politics in a sense, so she never liked that, and basically continued with the NGO.
I see. So how is it growing up because you would hang out at the orphanage, I suspect, with the other kids as well, during your childhood, no?
Yeah, and at home. So she always brought kids back home and to play with my sister, for example. And also did a lot of, there's a lot of charity work that you do, and like lunches that you raise capital, raise funds. There's like, you're always like, side by side with her. I think this was something that was part of my childhood. And my dad, as an engineer, now connecting a bit of the dots, and he was also from the maçonaria. I don't know this English. It's
Freemasons.
Freemasons that does all these same things. So they were basically working together in many different causes. And my dad was a university professor, like you said, and until 12 years old, I was basically living in Jabuticabal in the countryside of Brazil. And then my dad went to do his postdoctorate in Florida, in Gainesville, in the University of Florida. So that was my first international experience, and I lived there for almost 2 years. So yeah, that's an interesting fact that you didn't know about my previous childhood before the US.
But it's good. Now, it's interesting because you said about, just the fundraising for the orphanage and so forth, but you do it with kindness. You seem like you're very good at raising a lot of money, but with kindness. So that's now it's there's it's interesting just to observe that. But you ultimately, how is it? There was a time you've left Jabuticabal to go to the U.S. because you live in Florida for a little bit, and then what happened after that? Because then you went to college in Brazil, right? So when did you return?
That's right. So I went there to do my middle school, so basically 7th grade, and so during that period was just basically middle school. One thing that I like to notice, I was always a swimmer, so I always did swimming classes in the US and Brazil. I'm very tall, so I needed to do something with to use the energy, let's say, and I was terrible at soccer and any other sports that need more agility, let's say, so swimming was more natural to me. And yeah, so basically this was a lot of my childhood and the middle school experience in the US, the multicultural experience, and also talking with a lot of Brazilians, but also Latin American people that lived in the same situation in the university. Lifestyle also brings you a lot of different countries and different nationalities. That my father had friends from Turkey, friends from Colombia, and you know how Brazilians are in the US. So they have all these diverse. And then when I went back to Brazil, like I mentioned, my dad is a civil engineer. Basically was very keen to do engineering. So my dad said, okay, you have one option, or you have 4 options. It's civil, mechanical, and electrical engineer. Jokes aside, so my dad and my cousins and my uncles, they were all engineers. And basically I was like looking at like following the footsteps, let's say, and mechanical engineer for me was basically a passion because I liked airplanes, let's say, and like cars. This is as much as you can have what is engineering when you're 15, 16, 17 years old. So that was basically my selection. So I went to college in the countryside of Sao Paulo. So I did ONEVC, which is a federal state university from the state of Sao Paulo. And then during the school, I also learned that I didn't kind of like the engineer or the technical side, but I loved much more of the business and like working together of like building something during college. So right as in the first year that I joined college, I joined the junior enterprise, which is basically also an NGO that helps micro entrepreneurs. And I don't know if I told you that too. So
no, but it's a common thing on the podcast. It's just really interesting that I think out of the 12 CEOs, like there are 4 or 5 that also like have done this route. And for the Americans listening, I don't know what's the equivalent in a U.S. college, although I did a master's in the U.S. We were too old for that type of stuff. But it's basically, it's a business club, but it's actually, you're working as cheap consultants, right, for local companies that will hire you for free, willing to take the risk that there could be mistakes in your suggestions ultimately, right? So it's just basically, it's almost like a business club that solves real problems, right? I don't know if that's a good definition.
That's right, Peter. It's always depends on the city, but in our case, it was always very focused in medium-sized and small businesses. So basically, they would not have the money to hire a professional consultant. So you normally do small consulting projects regarding engineering, mechanical engineering, or production engineering, or civil. And it was basically, in my case, it was a 70-person organization. It ranges from 50 to 80 persons. And I like to say that I did my career in my college in my junior enterprise. So I joined as an intern, then became a director, and then became the CEO for that junior enterprise. So since college was when I really go deep into some of the experiences, and this was and we're basically doing the whole engineering. So basically all the 4 different types of engineering, all these consulting projects basically on during my college years.
Nice. Though these are so fun. I remember when I started in college and I understood what was the concept of like this, like, I mean, in Portuguese, right, the word like diretório acadêmico, but it was basically, right, like the student union. And then I realized, I was like, wait, there's a thing where we actually have real estate inside the campus and the university gives us money to just do whatever we want to do. I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. So, at my college, at least, like I disputed 3 elections for the student union. We won all of them.
Nice.
I was the editor of the local newspaper for the campus, and we were organizing all the parties. It was incredible. I mean, we were raising money from all these brands that wanted to get all the college kids drunk. The legal age, for that in Brazil, by the way, is 18, and we were running a business, but it was real money and real things. And, it just, those times were just really fun. I think that's the, I don't know, my take on college education is that everyone has to go to college. Not everyone needs to graduate it. There's a special thing for those first 2 years where you're hanging out with people the same age, or you can take a bunch of risks and make stupid decisions with a margin of safety,
Fully agree, Pedro.
Yeah. Unless you want to be a doctor, right? Like you don't want a surgeon operating on you that ships it with a bug, right? It's a little different. but
especially in engineering, yeah. I think nobody joins engineering school just to really be an engineer. I think 90% goes and do something else. So it's very, very usual to do that and these type of technical.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am not an engineer. I love working with engineers. I think our brains are very complementary in that way. But so you still, like, tech wasn't a part of your career when you finished university. So you worked for Bosch and International Paper. What was that transition? What was in your mind in terms of like, hey, this is the type of job that I want when you're out of college, and yeah, what was happening in your mind at that time?
Oh, that's a great question, Pedro. So basically, tech businesses were not on my mind. But actually, this is another funny thing. I'm not sure if I told you this. So I created a website together with two other friends in the countryside called nightfest.com.br. And we coded the website in PHP at the time. So I spent like a couple of weekends like really coding and creating the website. And it was basically a party website. So we went to parties, we took pictures, and we created like a small social media for the region. And it was actually the most visited website for 15 and 6-year-old kids. So
I love it. It's so funny because just like with the junior enterprises, I think you're the third entrepreneur that I interviewed that has done that as well for like its local town, you know. But like you're the fucking king when you do that, right? Because then you go to all the parties for free.
Exactly.
You take all the pictures, and then like, it's fun.
Exactly. It was a thing at the time. So everybody has their local city website, and it was like Groupon at the time. Like there was a lot of Groupons, and there was a lot of these kinds of websites. And again, it's a great excuse to be invited to the parties, and sometimes make money, like getting paid to do some of the pictures. But yeah, exactly like that. And there was no social media, so after the parties, everybody was like, "Oh, when you're gonna upload the pictures?" And everybody wants to see who is there, who is not there. So there was no Facebook at the time. So
yeah, it was interesting also because we would. I've been thinking this is completely like off of. I've been really thinking lately about how this immediacy of social media has been rewiring how our brain works. And how much we've been, in front of electronics for the last year and a half of the pandemic. And I think that my brain, honestly, I feel like it has been rewired just because of this pandemic lifestyle of always being with multiple screens on all the time. This is interesting because you're not really, on social media. I mean, there's so many CEOs that are kind of like in the same journey that you are. But you're not on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that. Why is that?
That's a great question, Pedro. So I never, and this is not like very recent, I never liked social media besides building the website when I was 15 years old. Basically, I don't know, I just never liked like putting pictures and seeing the pictures or really exposing myself. And since the NBA, for example, was a great example. Like we were traveling a lot and like, meeting a lot of people, meeting a lot of places. And there were two kinds of people. Like one, there was posting every city that you visit, and then there's the other that don't want to post anything. So I was like always not using a lot of the time on that, and I think I lose a lot of information also. I sometimes I think that I should be more active on Twitter, like trying to find things or learn more on Twitter. But yeah, I think it was more of a habit, let's say, that I did not form than actually like a personal, like really structured decision.
No, I disagree. I think it's phenomenal, because ultimately I think what makes you successful as an entrepreneur is the ability of thinking for yourself. And the issue with spending so much time on social media is that you lose the ability of, in my opinion, to just develop through independent thinking. Sure, I mean, you probably do also lose a few different things that are at the core of the micro discussion levels, but eventually, if those trends are so secular and so strong, they'll get to you. Because the number of people that are around you that have been doing these types of consumptions are just so big that as long as you associate yourself with high quality people that have some sort of filter that you think it's conducive to how you live your life, you should be okay. For me, I admire it because, I am certainly addicted to it. But at the same time, it's such a big part of my day-to-day flow. I appreciate the fact that, in one day I can talk to people in 30 different countries. And that happens sometimes, right? Today I had calls with people in Italy, in London, and in Canada. Now we're talking, you're in Brazil, I'm in Miami. So it's, in social media, sometimes they are the forcing function to generate these connections. Sometimes they're not. It's just it's a tough balance in many ways, I'd say. But so how, and then you decided to go to business school, right? So you worked for some traditional companies, and then was it a time where you were like, was a decision behind going to B school? And
yeah, so basically when I left college, since I was very focused on like the junior enterprise, I didn't do any like very technical projects. So my first job was at Bosch as a trainee engineer, working with the team that developed the flex fuel engine, which is basically let's say the ethanol and gasoline cars, which is basically what the majority of the cars here in Brazil are run. And at the time,
yes. For those that don't know, the Americans, again, like what is like I think most Americans have no idea that, you can fuel your car. Well, like tell us what is a flex engine?
Exactly. So basically you can fuel your car with ethanol or gasoline or both and still works perfectly. And this is specifically for Brazil is probably one of the largest or the largest flex fuel producing countries. And especially because we have a large production of ethanol, bio-renewable energy, instead of just relying on oil. And for me, the decision back then was, okay, I'm going to do something more technical and something that can really benefit the world in a sense, which is like building better cars, like less pollutive cars. And that was my decision at the time. So it was basically product development. So product development for the automotive sector. So I did that for a year and saw that I didn't want to go to a more technical business area, a more technical area. So there was, in Brazil, there's also one thing called a trainee program or management trainee program that you enter in a company or business and you go into very different areas and expand to very, like from commercial sides, exports. And then I joined International Paper for that. And International Paper, I don't know if a lot of people knows that, but they do more than 60% of packaging. It's called International Paper, but their biggest business is also packaging. And it's really like working with renewable packaging and do like Starbucks, iPhone, all these packagings. They also do it. And for me at the time, it was like, this is going to continue to grow. Besides, of course, paper is going to disappear sometime or hopefully faster. But the training program made a lot of sense that you're going to have like a broader business perspective. That was the second decision, career decision, let's say, before business school.
Got it. But then why go to business school ultimately? Because after that, you still did consulting. So I guess my point basically here is that trying to get you that moment where you're like, I want to be a founder, and there are still a few other chapters that had to happen. Mm-hmm. So, for now, with all the respect, like your career is still very traditional. And there isn't that, I'm going to take all this risk and create the company. But you had access to what entrepreneurship looks like, right? Based from your mom, from your father taking risk, moving the family to another country, right? No, these are non-trivial things. It's just different, I think, because oftentimes you will see this, like the minute that you make your first money with your photo website, for instance, some people get addicted and they're like, I can't have a job anymore. And some don't. And then it's just more interesting to, get you to that point where, so you're like, hey, yeah, I want to do B school. And then, there was also a venture competition. And then OptiTruck. This came up in research. I was also not aware of OptiTruck. And then this is great chart. Thank you to our great producer. But yeah.
Yeah. So let me step back and give you my frame of thought. So basically in Brazil, it was not common to be a founder. So it's like there were very few founders, and those founders were like rock stars, right? So now, of course, it's more common. There's VCs. There was capital that you can raise, and you can basically create a business with support from venture capital firms. And I had my uncle. He built a business, and he was very successful in the real estate business. And basically what he did is he worked for big companies for many years. Then he built a business. And this was in my mindset. So like, let me work with professional companies for a while. Let be more more capitalized, let's say, and more experienced before creating a business. And this was always on my mindset. And during that period, I learned more about MBAs and learned more about the other entrepreneurs in Brazil. And you have many other entrepreneurs that did their MBA and then created a business. So for me, that was my initial thought of becoming an entrepreneur. So MBA was basically a career transition, and was something that I thought, okay, this makes a lot of sense to do an MBA and learn more about managing business, like building let's say, the skills necessary to be successful. Because you didn't have a lot of those great examples, like starting from scratch and without any degree or without any like really experience. There were a few. And basically during the MBA was when I really started switching the plug to more entrepreneur experience, and OptiTrack was a great example. So basically we started during the MBA, and I was trying to think about big problems that I could solve. And one big problem that we had in International Paper was trucking, basically. So International Paper was the third or fourth largest container export business in Brazil. There were basically a lot of trucks moving around, and they go to the Port of Santos and they come back empty. And I was trying to fix that problem for International Paper when I was there, like one of the logistics projects. And when I went to the MBA, like doing the research and basically have more time to think and to reflect. I think that's good to stop, and it's like a sabbatical. Let's say the MBA. I think that's the best part of the business school. And this was a big problem that was like, okay, this is a huge problem. And I know the customer that would buy my solution, which is my previous company. And of course, you maximize, you know that this is a huge problem, especially in Brazil, because roads are the majority of the transportation of Brazil. There's only a few railroads. There's only a few hydro of transportation, or like boats transportation in Brazil. So basically you need to solve trucks, make it better to move things around. And that was my problem statement. And during INSEAD, just like you have BlaBlaCar and other startups that they did the venture competitions. So we participated on the venture competition with the idea, with the pitch deck. We created an MVP online with the website together with Pedro, he used to be a general manager for Uber and then 99. He was on my batch, and we did this project together. And also Rob, who went to work for Google in Singapore, and now he's building a business. So we together, we basically won some of the venture competitions that some other like startups, like I mentioned, did in SAT. So that was like the initial tentative for doing the business. And during that year, CargoX just raised capital, and basically we saw that it was going to be harder to raise capital with already a very good player and a very good company raising capital for the same problem, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, like CargoX raising around puts you in this position of like, I'm going to quit this idea. I like the topic of when you're out to raise a round, you want to try to close off the market, meaning make sure that all the investors that could potentially invest in that category will pick you as the category leader. And oftentimes, I think founders overlook that because, but they don't know, right? The best investors will be the ones that will only I like, at least in my mind, I pick markets, then people in those markets, and then products. So when you make a bet, I don't like that word actually, when you partner, that's the best way of putting it. You then are making a decision that, that company will be the absolute leader in that category. So the best investors at least work that way. I would say that the only ones that I've seen that are super comfortable investing in competitors are, the YCombinators or 500 startups or tech startups, just because of the volume of companies that they fund, which is also okay. This isn't even a criticism of them, but I think what founders need to understand when you're talking about that is just like, and I would love your thoughts on that. Like, how do you think about, every time you raise a new round, to make sure that you basically put yourself into this like protective track of becoming the de facto monopoly, right? Which means you have to raise from multiple investors.
Exactly, Peter. I think this is one's. I think it varies also for region to region, but especially in Brazil, this is even more intense because you don't have now you're having more, but in the past years you have few VC venture capital firms, so you didn't have a lot of different options, and tech was also something very very risky. So basically, you need to really think the next steps of building a business, who invested in who, and basically if you can get more investors on that region specifically partnering with you, it increases the likelihood of success definitely in attracting more capital.
Yeah. Okay. So then you come back from INSEAD, just some great, beautiful vacation in South France.
And a big debt, of course, like student loans.
Yes. And then you joined Bain. And what was the thinking there? Was it because, they help you pay for the MBA, or you're like, look, I want to be a consultant? I always find it interesting to hear the reasons why people decide to be consultants or bankers. It's fascinating.
Right. So for me, consulting was, especially inside, you learn a lot about consulting, and basically what I saw is just a continuation of the business school, and you're going to build a lot of the skills in practice, and you're going to learn a lot about different industries. And in those different industries, I was always have the thought, okay, I'll find something that will solve another problem that could make a lot of sense. And in my time at International Paper, I say, okay, I discovered this problem. Now there's someone tackling that problem. I'm sure it's going to be a great business. So let me learn about other problems to solve. And I think that was my frame of thought with consulting. So let me learn more. Of course, in consulting, you get a lot of the experience of the frameworks that you can use in the day-to-day business, and the presentation skills, the commercial skills, and all those things are necessary and good to practice as you become a founder. So for me, the consulting was an acceleration and with the mindset that I mentioned, like building the experience and learning more about world problems, and consulting for me was a way to find it. And
I see.
And basically,
but then can you pick when you get the job, say, hey, I want to work in these particular industries? Because suddenly I've had friends that were consultants and, they were stuck in these like really, really unsexy projects. Like, I mean, it wasn't your case. You were, you end up at 99, which then, led to all these great things in your life. But you really don't have that choice, right? When you take that job, if they say, yes, we have this hospital manufacturer in the middle of a tier 3, whatever, go there, help them make more money. Like, then, right.
It's kind of like that, and it varies. Like for example, McKinsey, they had the operational practice and they have the consulting strategy practice. So in the operational practice, especially in Brazil, you get a lot of minings, you get a lot of other hardcore operational works, and I didn't want to go down that direction, for example. And at Bain, they are more generalist. So basically, there was a higher probability for you to go to several different industries and to meet a lot of those different industries. And BCG at the time, they were doing a lot of oil and gas. So basically, when you learn about consulting, there's also a lot of difference between them. And Bain was a natural selection because for one of those reasons. And also I had some friends that was working there. And basically, that was the initial thought, but you do have some flexibility. So at 99, it was funny coincidence, or actually, I think all the coincidence happens for a reason. So I was leaving one block from 99, and Marcos, who was an Endeavor director at the time, and then he went to 99 with Paulo. He pinged me on LinkedIn and I did an interview with him while I was at Bain. Like this was December. And he was like, oh, you should come to 99. We're going to raise this $100 million with D. And then I had on the 1 week afterwards or 2 weeks afterwards, I had the interview with Peter and André, which were the CEO and the CFO. And during that process, I was changing project at Bain. And I had a conversation with the guys that were managing the projects. And we just landed the project with 99. And basically I said, I want to do this project. I want to go there and do this project. And then I called Marcos and said, look, I'm gonna join 99 if you want it or not. I'm coming with Bain. And then I joined.
I love it.
And then I joined 99 as a Bain consultant, basically.
That's great. It's funny when things like that, with that level of like Jungian synchronicity happens, you either wonder, like, is the simulation extremely well coded, or is this an act of God? Because like, think about it, right? There are like 6 or 7 specific coincidences that involve messages digitally as well as you walking around at the same place, right? So none of this is by chance.
Exactly. I mean, São Paulo is a huge city. Imagine that you had a project that you were walking like 200 meters from the place you live. It's not so common.
Right.
But yeah.
Exactly. I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I think that project changed my life for sure. I was doing a lot of those projects that you mentioned, banks and all those very interesting projects. But 99 was definitely like, I joined, there was about 100 people, 150 people. When I left, there was more than 1,000. All those things happened in 1 year. So they achieved almost 30% market share. Didi joined, like the great Chinese culture that I really admire, like fast-paced implementation and the culture, the simplicity that they came with, like the hardcore hyper-growth mentality. And all those things really changed my life, together with the people I've met, like great people, great entrepreneurs, all these guys that I mentioned, like Peter, Andre, Marcos. There's so many different the guys from Swaps. I mean, there's so many, Woody. I mean, so many people that I cannot name here on this call, but it was an amazing experience.
That's great. Well, I want to touch on one point that you talked about, which I think is something that Mike Moritz also wrote at this notorious column in the Financial Times, I think 2 years ago, where he said, look, Silicon Valley is just getting way too fucking soft, right? Everyone, you're worried about like the 5th flavor of kombucha in your fridges, whereas maybe a decade ago, people, you would see parking lots full over the weekends. And this is not an addendum or like an incentive, like just saying that, hey, hustle culture is a great thing, because you do have mental health issues and burnout and all of that. But fundamentally, I would say that there was a collective, and this ethos still exists in the Bay Area and now has been decentralized to other parts of the globe due to the pandemic, but of people that, you sign up for a pretty tough job because that's what you want, and you will want to be around these people that are obsessed about solving these problems. And it turns out that, when you're obsessed about it, that kind of takes a big part of your life. Whereas I believe that the demise of the city of San Francisco, which in my opinion today is the next Detroit, the rest of the Bay Area is still great. But the city of San Francisco itself, it started 6-7 years ago when people were throwing rocks at the Google buses. And, this is a long addendum to say that's like, they were just hiring all these middle managers that were making way more money than they were supposed to make and being fed like spoiled little kids, all these benefits. Oh, here's food, here's laundry, here's this, here's that. And they just became really entitled. Whereas when you compare to China, and you look at the 996, which is something that, Mike Morse talked about in that article. I mean, these people, they are ruthless. And but I liked how you described it. You said hardcore simplicity. So what have you learned from the culture, of the Chinese? Like, how was it like in 99 pre-Didi and post-Didi? Taking in consideration this comment that I've made.
That's a great question, Pedro. And I think it was an amazing experience. So I worked with Lin. He's the global head of expansions for Didi, and he was my boss and also my client when I was at Bain. So basically, Lin, he has a funny story. So when Didi was fighting against Uber, Lin was the last general manager fighting, or the last one winning against Didi. And what Didi did, they hired Lin and brought him in to Didi, basically, and they won, let's say, the war against Uber, and that's the way they state the challenge there. It was a war, and Didi, they always use, the Chinese, they always use this war mentality and war against war against value destruction, war against there are a lot of things that you can be in war against, and I think the mentality from Didi is basically like very practical. The communication, it's very different than the US, the Americans, that they're a bit more politics, a bit more open. There's a lot of more conversation. There is just more of execution, like clear goals, clear tasks, a bit more hierarchy, which is also, I would say, not necessarily a bad thing, but could be a bad thing depending on the way or the culture of the business. But basically, they just work really hard, and they're just great people to be around, and I don't know. I think it comes a lot with the Brazilian mentality. That São Paulo also, like, people, they work really hard, and especially in consulting, for example, and it has some of the same mentality. And the other thing, that's one phrase that Elena also, when I was leaving 99 and discussing like the next steps, and they were really like helpful, and they were like, okay, if you want to leave, I wish you, of course, the best, and we'll support. And one thing that Lynn told me was basically, look, you're gonna serve underserved people that don't have the access of having the cars. So make sure you don't have fancy offices. Make sure you don't like people are really close to the drivers. Make sure, so they're like really worried not only about like creating the business, but they are also really worried about making an impact. And this, I cannot speak of all the Chinese business, but this is with Didi, for example, and this was specifically with Lynn. And I think this is one thing that's also caught my eyes from the experience I had with them, like working really hard, but also very conscious of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and I think that also matched my personality.
Oh, that's great. It's like Confucius meets Sun Tzu, and with a bunch of venture capital. I think it's a very good combination. I would say that so many founders, we all have so much to learn from how the Chinese do things, and I'm grateful to live in the West, in places where you have democracies that were founded on Judeo-Christian principles. But when it comes to startup, building a company that raises venture, I think what fundamentally people don't realize is that they're not signing up for democracies. I think that whole holacracy thing is an absolute joke. You need a place where people know who has the responsibility, who has the final accountability, final say, and then move fast, right? It's flexible enough, like water or like a bamboo, to take from the Bruce Lee, book of life, I guess, that you adapt really fast when you make mistakes, but you move fast. And that ruthlessness that the Chinese have, I think it's far better to when it comes to building companies. And we're starting to see again other companies in the U.S. Eradicate, in my opinion, what I would consider distractions from the core mission. Because if you think about it, these big companies, in my opinion, at least, they have so many distracted employees right now. I don't know. There's the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which is ridiculous. Like, these people should be able to just get along. But at Apple, you have 3,000 employees out of the, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands they have, signing up petitions and spending half of their day thinking about these things. And, that's not how you manage to execute really well. So I think that what China has, when you have a little bit less freedom, and this is not I'm not advocating for that, because I live in the US, right? Like, I would never live in China. But when it comes to running a company, I think that, when I was at SendGrid, I remember we had such a strong culture, and, I was selling an email API, but I felt like I was changing the world every day, and I was so motivated to do work and kick ass. And it was because we had a strong culture. It wasn't this decentralized thing. I think that's important. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Exactly, Pedro. I think naturally the Chinese, there are so many, the population is so huge and the competition is so fierce that if you're building a business, there's like 5 other copycats that's right next to you, and you just need to execute really fast and move fast. And I think that's a bit of the mentality from the Chinese. They really prioritize agility instead of just like some of the corporate governance and everything that we see on the big tech companies that across not only in the US but also in Brazil and the traditional companies. And I think this is going to continue. I think China is going to continue like moving fast, and basically this is an exponential curve, right? So they're going to move fast. A lot of the businesses, and I think definitely they're going to move faster than the rest of the world because of that culture that is not only the startup culture but also the whole Chinese culture and big population and just the competition.
Okay, and then when you were then thinking about building Kovi, what were the very, very, very early days? Because for some people don't know, but Kovi was actually called Budakar before. It still is on the the legal entity name, right?
Exactly. So basically, how did it start? So when we were at 99, there was actually my first day at 99, we're launching cities, and one of the cities that we were launching we had this big barbecue with the drivers that they were welcoming in 99. Because they saw that we're generating a lot of value for them, and another option, better take rate, like half of the take rate from Uber. And the other thing was access to that job. And a lot of people don't know, but in Brazil, if you're an on-demand driver, not only Uber, Didi, or other platforms, you're also making more than 50 to 70% of the other paid jobs. And basically that's life changing, right, for a majority of the population in Brazil. But the only problem is that you don't have the car, and most of the people in Brazil, only about 30% of people get financing approved to get a car. And the second thing is Brazil has one of the largest spread between auto financing and or tax, the national tax rate, basically, which is 18% versus like 3%. And that's huge. So it's really hard to get a car. It's really hard to get financing. All the big banks problems that we are really aware in Brazil that happens with car financing. And basically, there was this massive 1-2 million drivers trying to get in, trying to get a job, and 70% of them didn't have a car, or even more. So basically, how do we solve that? And this is basically a fintech business. It's not like a rental business. Rental is just the outside of our business. But at the end of the day, what we do is access. So we use all the data possible to give more access to these drivers. And we're looking at the rental businesses. There were rental businesses. They were not like building fintechs, or they were not building specifically business tailored to serve the underserved. So the early day was like trying to find to solve a funnel problem for 99, and with more than 1 million drivers, and the rental business market was like less than the number of drivers that there was in ride sharing. We saw this is a massive opportunity to be in and disrupt the auto industry.
Yeah, I remember when we were looking at the opportunity to partner, for the first check, and then and we realized that we're like, oh, there wasn't just one, not two, not three, but there are like 6 different secular trends that help grow this market and sustain the opportunity of the types of problems that Kovi solves. And for those listening, right, that's what the VC wants. You want to be in a situation where, is there a plan for Kovi to become a $10 billion company? Yes. Is there a plan for Kovi to be a $50 billion? It's possible. All these things are very possible. So I remember when we realized that it was an important day, because just that the economical disparity between access to a car, which is for most people the second most expensive thing that they will ever buy aside from their home in their lifetime, if they can afford, right? And then the financing aspects, and just across the board, the utilization is just so interesting. And then ownership also is changing dramatically for most people, right? So it's interesting. It's a positive double whammy that it's very rare that you see that in large markets, but also to have a team that can capture that as well, like you guys, is always a privilege.
No, Pedro,
to be able to work together. But
it's also important to say, and I think this is very recent in the last 6 months. So We started with our hearts and our center, in the core, the on-demand economy and the drivers. And again, we landed in a secular change where people are relating to car more on the subscription level. And now we're basically focused on the whole underserved population. So we're doing more and more B2C. Now it represents almost 25% of our business. The long-term plan, which is like basically a substitution of the cars. And this is another really big trend. So the auto industry, like Volvo states that in 2025, 50% of their new sales are going to be subscription. So basically, you're substituting the relationship you have with that asset with a much better service. You sign, the next day you get a car, that's it. You don't need to worry about documentation, taxes, financing, insurance, and all these other burdens that you get. Plus, you get the accessibility trait, basically. You don't need to relate with the big banks. You just sign and use it for your personal use, basically.
Yeah. So coming back to, I think, you're talking about some of the massive market opportunities right within Kovi. And when we think about, there's financing, there's access, there's car ownership, there's the ability of having a better economical future, because you end up making far more than if you were, selling clothes on retail or serving people at restaurants, when you have access to the actual vehicle to actually go out and work for one of the platforms. And when you combine all of that, what are your thoughts on electrification, right? And car subscription as well? Like, what are some of the large trends that you're starting to observe that will fundamentally change Kovi's business model, as well as Uber and Didi and Lyft and so forth?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pedro. First of all, I think Brazil is a great place for electrical vehicles. Of course, there's also the infrastructure issue of the electricity and like the creation of generation of electricity. But basically, our natural resources are more than 85% clean energy, like coming from clean source of energy, specifically hydro energy, or basically, I don't know how to say that in English, but basically
just water movement.
Water movement energy, basically. So that's a great news. And the second thing is the on-demand economy is also have more benefit of using an electric vehicle because of the TCO, the total cost of ownership of having better and cheaper energy. So I think Brazil is going to definitely change specifically for the on-demand economy in the future to be fully electric or electrified, basically. And you do have like Didi moving towards like building their own purpose-driven vehicle, Ford ride sharing in China. So I think in our region, it's just a matter of time, but also things don't move from day to night to electrification. So as you see, Tesla, for example, it took a long time to really change and be a massive product and to really change the infrastructure. So I think it's going to be a transition in many years. So it's not going to be like 1 year or 2 years, everything is electric. It's going to probably take a decade or so.
It's too inconvenient, right, to own one of those unless you live in a house, I would say. So if you live in a house and you have solar and then you have a Tesla, then it's great because you just park your car in the garage and you plug it in and it's always charged. Very rarely you're going to need the full autonomy and you have to like make these calculations. It's just, especially if when you buy a car, you actually have access to a second vehicle, so I think it's a good car for a family that you can be on track to electrification, have combustion and one electric car, but you need access to the charging port at your convenience. At least for me, right? Could I afford a Tesla today? Yes. Do I have one? No. Why? Because I live in buildings and then you do have the charging ports, but you have to schedule them. And then it's a pain. Yes, we're too busy, right? I mean, I don't know. We have usually 7-9 meetings a day. I don't have time to think about scheduling when I'm going to be able to have my car charged or plan ahead to, certainly gas is more expensive, but for the most part, it's so available. You drive to a pump, you pump it, it's there, and it works. Mm-hmm. I think that, and I bought a car during the pandemic. I had cars before, and but the time in San Francisco, I moved with a car from Colorado, and then and I had to pay for the parking garage, and so basically I just kept it. But then after a while, I sold it. And in Miami, you have to have a car, and I researched a lot in terms of what type of car I would buy today. And it was basically like I need the best residual value, the lowest amount of maintenance with the highest amount of comfort, which ended up putting me in. I mean, I ended up by getting a Lexus, but it was just which is a nicer version of Toyota. But it if ISIS uses their trucks in the desert. I think that they need to be probably very reliable. This is not to say that, ICE is a terrible organization, but it's just kind of like, if you think about it, like what type of truck a terrorist would buy, like he buys a Toyota. So probably that car's not going to break. So
great
right,
analogy.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting. I think like and I have a friend here. We were driving this past weekend. He has a Taycan, which is the electrical version of the Porsche. And I mean, the car is really cool, but I thought it was just so boring because it doesn't make a sound, and it has a fake sound. But it's just it's an interesting. So I've been thinking about this in terms of like, how are you gonna? And I have another friend that's one of our investors, and he just bought a Ferrari F40. It's a $1.3 million car, right? So it's very different when you compare these things. And I don't know what you think is going to happen. That was my question to you. With the electrification and subscription for vehicle access, well, ultimately 90% of the time, you just want to get someplace else, which hopefully you can multitask, and you're going to get there at the cheapest price with the highest amount of safety and comfort. Right? That's what mobility is about at the end of the day. But then there's the experience of driving something nice. So I maybe combustion engines are the new vinyl records,
I think there will be definitely Pedro. And my personal opinion about cars, and I don't know if I told you this before, I think cars are the worst asset that humankind has ever created. So it occupies a huge portion.
I love it. From the Kovi CEO, I love it.
That's the worst possible asset that the humankind has ever created. So imagine that it occupies. You need to do financing. It pollutes the environment, not only in the production, but also when you have the car. Even the electric pollutes a lot, and it stays 97% of the time, on average, stopped in a garage. So you have huge graveyards of cars just stopped there, not doing anything, basically. And I think Kovi is doing our part to make those assets better, like put that in the hands of somebody who's actually using the asset, not only just park that in the garage. And it's just, the auto industry, it needs to be disrupted in the next 20, 30, 40 years. That's for me, that's really clear. Just like horses in New York, like you have a bunch of horses and like the typical cliche story. Cars for me is the same thing. Like especially if you live in big urban centers like São Paulo, there's a lot of things that needs to be done, like micromobility, like public transportation, all those things. Uber, of course, is going to continue to scale the on-demand economy. But that being said, like given the fact that there's this like terrible asset, but it's also a luxury good. So the luxury good for majority of the population, you want to have it as a status symbol. And again, another thing that humankind is facing, that you have like this asset that is a luxury good, and you want to show around. It's a big toy, like the ones you mentioned. It's actually a toys for big people, for adults. So I think it's going to be hard to change that behavior. Like people still want toys, and that's going to be hard, especially the luxury cars. But the other hand, like the majority of the population who now is more conscious, like the younger generation that has, I think the humankind is evolving their conscience, and with time, it's not going to be fast. But like you have a lot of people with 16, 15 years old that they don't want a car, especially in the big centers, because they were born in a world that you can order groceries online, that you can go from point A to point B online. So if they want to own a car, it would be probably a better service. And for me, a better service is a subscription service that you don't want to like deal with like government taxes and all those other things. So I think in Brazil and developing countries, just like mobile devices that like we were expecting, like people would first buy computers and then mobile devices. I think it's just like car subscription for developing countries. So probably we'll move already towards car subscription faster than the penetration of cars that you have in the US. So like people would naturally move towards, depending on the personal use, move towards using Uber or using on-demand services like Rappi, iFood, or if they really need, and it's a really like it's a big need, especially if you're in countries that the public transportation is not that good, so you really need a car. And I think the next best option is just sign one and just run away from big banks and big insurance companies and all those things. And I think that will be the next best thing besides not owning one car, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, it was liberating not having a car for such a long time in San Francisco. I only got one because of the pandemic. I mean, unfortunately, the draconian lockdowns in California were such that, and honestly, like I bought the car with Zoom stock. I mean, I had a bunch of Zoom at like $66, and when it shot up to almost $500, I sold it, bought the car, and to start learning how to play golf. Like it's such a like I mean, hopefully I don't sound like a douchebag. It's just like we couldn't do anything else. You couldn't leave your home. Everything was closed. So that was the whole thing. And I would go to the driving range almost every day to just find peace. But now in Miami, it's such an individualistic society here, where, for instance, across the street from where I live, there's this little monorail in Brickell that is free. And it's slow. It doesn't really take you to many places. So you really have to have a car while public transit is free. But like there's terrible public transportation here, which is a shame. Like we should all be able to have, when you're talking about the evolution of human consciousness, right? Just these like free for grab jet skis where, but you're not going to get wet and you're just, roaming around and you go to Miami Beach and you come back and you do this and do that. And scooters, I would say, are probably the very first example of that, but it also shows how hard it is to coordinate a bunch of monkeys like us as humans, because people put the scooters on the sidewalk, they'll knock them down, they won't really preserve or take care of them. You have to limit the speed of it because you're going to have people, on the sidewalk rushing across the street. And in the beginning of the scooter stuff, like 3 years ago, it was madness, right? Now I think that there's far more civilization and understanding of it. But as a society, we just evolve, it's a slow process. So when I think about car subscription, right, the one thing that it's important, although you say, okay, 97% of, non-utilization for the asset, which is terrible. And by the way, Kovi has an incredible utilization rate, but which is, it's a metric that, you guys need to be very proud of. But the amount of things that you have to have working in coordination for car subscription to be really, really functional is insane. Right? Because I remember it took me a while to make this decision of buying the car. I didn't want to buy a car because I have that same feeling that you have. And I was like, I'm not going to take a lease. I will never buy a new car. It's a terrible investment. There's no investment, right? Sure. I think, be honest with yourself. You want to get an exotic car and you want to get and then you just say, I'm just doing it for the ego. I like toys. No problem, right? I think it's the Ecclesiastes book on the Bible talks about the importance of like enjoying the mundane earth-plane pleasures. Great. Enjoy yourself. But everything else, when you think about convenience, I was using Turo and Getaround a lot during the pandemic. So at the time, and when I started spending $300-400 a month on rentals, but every time getting access to the car was a pain in the ass because it's a different building, it's a different car, and then the community has a gate, or there's a code on this, and there's a code. So it's like it's a fucking errand, and you have to buffer so much time. So what do you think that needs to be true? Like, what would be the magnum opus, the perfect car subscription experience for someone in terms of like, I open up a phone, I look at the thing, how, I get you the car, I unlock, like, what's the best possible experience that you think would make it like ubiquitous, and then, so then people that have cars, it's just, fancy toys and stuff like that.
For me, of course, the best relationship with cars, I would still say it's Uber or Lyft, right? So you click a button, there's someone there, and he's going to take you somewhere else. And in developing countries, there's a big difference of income, so you have that with a cheap price. In the US, it's different, and if you're going to walk around using Uber, it's going to be very expensive. So that would not be the ideal solution. But I would say the second best to have the car itself will be, and especially if you have use cases that you're going to use it naturally, like every week, or that would be just like a sign and drive, a long-term rental, basically, because let's say you get it for 3 months and you're going to use it, and then you switch to other type of vehicles later on. So basically, you don't need to worry about anything else, like insurance, all these other things, and you're paying the right amount for that car. So basically, if you really need to have it or get access to the car, it's basically a simple math that you can sign with a better customer experience with everything included. And then third, which would be harder, which is basically an infrastructure place. If you had enough space to have a pool of cars like very close to where you live, and basically which is car sharing, but it needs to be a really seamless experience. So let's say you're going to travel to the beach and you just like you don't have a car, you're using Uber or public transportation a lot, but on the weekend it's much better to drive your own car and like move around, and basically that would be basically a car sharing experience that you can unlock the car, of course, with your phone and just move around. But it needs to be in a way where logistically it's really well positioned across the city, so that it's really democratized. And I think that would be the other thing. And the other was, it's really bad for you to have a subscription of only one car, because you have different types of use cases, right? So you're gonna take a girl on a date, you want, I don't know, maybe you want a Porsche and you want to have like a better experience, and now you're just going to travel from point A to point B safely. Maybe you want a Volvo, I don't know, you want something more safer with the family. So basically, if you have the optionality of switching cars across different use cases, or even like months, like maybe 1 month or the other, that would be the ideal subscription that you would have, basically.
I would add to that, like, if we could have a sovereign individual libertarian, car OS system that would work as follows, right? I carry my identity, I carry all my preferences that goes from music to seating to, space here to everything within my phone. And I come into any of these cars, could be a Porsche, could be a Corolla, could be whatever. I plug my phone into the car, but the computer system and the OS is standard. So as soon as you get into the car, the seat adapts, right? The music starts playing whatever you're playing on Spotify. So it feels like it's your car, because that's the worst part about like always renting or getting a new subscription. You got to sit and you do the mirror and you do this and you do that, and like and you have some BMWs, right, or like other luxury cars where you have the profiles, but it isn't to that level of personalization. Then I think when you have something like that, where even the rental can feel like it's yours to a certain extent, I think that you will, but it would require, I think Tesla is the only company that's capable of doing something like that today, with their, phenomenal integration with hardware and software and how that screen works with your phone. Because it's interesting, the beginning of Tesla, when the software wasn't that good, I would see some Tesla owners that they'd have the big screen, but always a little, support for the phone, like right next to the actual like massive screen. And over time, the OS has gotten better. and that's not necessary anymore. When you look into some of the other even the luxury car market with their computers, if they're not using Apple Car or the Android one, I forgot the name, it really sucks. It's like a wonky little thing, and even the integrations that they do, because each car wants manufacturer, they're losing so much control, and they're becoming so irrelevant over time that they and it's almost as if there was this ego battle when they were making all these decisions, and they're like, oh, we're better, we want to do it inside, we want to do it in-house, or we want to just outsource it. But when you have ubiquitous, in my opinion, machine to software integration, then I think people will be super down to say, I don't need a car anymore, I don't want it. And what you said is true as well, just having a plethora of choices across the board. Which is fascinating, because this whole thing makes the entire Kovi platform like it can be a 30-year plan. There will still be so much innovation that has to happen across the board, right?
That's right. And it changes a lot depending on the infrastructure. Like in the US, it's going to, with a lot of cars and great roads and the space that you have, it's gonna be different. So probably the autonomous vehicle, it's going to become much faster, and that will reduce the cost of the ride a lot. So that would change a lot of the behavior and the relationship that people will have with cars. Because if you have, let's say, if a ride in Uber costs like 50 or 60% or 70% less than what you're paying right now, that will probably change your decision criteria to buying or not buying a car. Which is something that changes here in Brazil, right? So as you reduce the total cost of ownership, as you have electric vehicles with better TCO, and you probably accelerate that transition, and you're still gonna need the using the car as a toy and as an experience, right? So I think the moving around is gonna be more mechanical, less brand driven. But you're still going to have specific needs that it's going to be an ego-driven decision or an experience, or with the car.
When it flips, also when level 5 automation for cars is actually at such level that is actually dangerous for you to be a regular driver versus an automated driver, I think that's going to be interesting when that happens.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's now we're seeing a lot of not only the technology issue, but you're going to see social issues with the technology. I think the level 5 automation is going to be it's really going to impact society in such many different ways that we can not even imagine now. I think that's.
Adhemar, another thing I wanted to talk about was just your relationship with meditation, spirituality, just across the board, and how does that impact your life? I think that we've always had a good relationship in terms of helping you raise money and being the investor-fan relationship, but our connection, I think it transcended after we've had some of these conversations. So. What type of mindful practice do you have in your life, and how do you integrate, between working on yourself and working on, being a good person and being the best person you can possibly be with your day-to-day as, the leader of Kovi, and, and also as a husband and so forth? Like how do you have rituals? Like how's that, in terms of a part of your life?
No, thank you for that question, Pedro. I think that comes on the more interesting parts, or the things that I do think that I mostly need to evolve also. And I think our minds are our best asset for sure, right? So we always work with our body, we work with our financial assets, but sometimes we forget about our mind and controlling our mind and changing it. And I think meditation for sure is definitely one of those things that help a lot, and it needs to be done consistently over many days, many years. And for me, my major practices are basically every day first thing in the morning or before like working out, and doing this for 10 minutes or 20 minutes with Headspace, like very simple. And during the weekends, also try to focus and do that too. And basically, there are some days that you really want to meditate and like read something and then meditate, which is something that I also like to do. And it's always about consistent. And I think like having a great timing to just be aware of what you're doing, be aware of what you're like, what are your thoughts, and just being aware, it reduces the anxiety and reduces a lot of that stress. And being aware is not only meditation. I think you mentioned that point. I think being aware is like doing things that makes you feel alive. So for me, I personally like cycling, for example. I like kite surfing also a lot. When I was younger, I loved to do skateboarding and roller skating, like jumping things and and doing all those like flip, like doing all those things. And for me, those things made me feel alive and aware, because when you're doing that, you forget about everything, right? So if you're doing like 3 hours downwind kite surfing, you just forget about everything, and that's conscious, right? So conscious is just being aware at that present moment and forgetting about all the storyline that you have in your mind, and the storyline about your life, about your anxieties, about your, I don't know, health, friends, business. So meditation is one thing. The other thing is action sports or anything that makes you worry about what you're doing right now. Tennis is also a great thing. Like if you're not paying attention, you're gonna get bit off really fast. And there's a lot of practices on that. So my thought is like putting those things that make you forget about other things on your schedule, and doing those things like regularly. It should be something that's, I mean, for me, it works really well. And I think this is part of like being more mindful on the day to day. I think that helps on the day to day life. And yeah, I think those are some of the other
None of them involve being behind a screen, which I think
great
is
things
just
that I can
fundamental
say.
for mindfulness and this universal connection with the divine, which ultimately means that also you're connecting with yourself. And what is it, your mission of evolution here, like you said. So it's interesting when you learn how to make it into a ritual. I think that it just gets fascinating, because you can then start, I wouldn't say productizing, but I don't know, for me, I have very specific routines that put me into that level of vibration. And I don't know if you have a specific morning routine or something around that you said like you do it in the morning, and like are there a few things that you always feel like you have to do in the morning, so then your day starts right, or something like that?
Yeah, so for me, I love to. I mean, I love sports in general. So for me, one sport that helps me have the diversity, but also keep like a good routine, is triathlon. So basically, I wake up like 6:15, and then do some meditation, and then either go running, and then do like physiotherapy if I some of the days like twice per week, and the other days I'm just cycling on my bike. So start like with the meditation, and then start listening to audiobooks or YouTube videos. I think this for me is a great timing for like you do a really fast catch up on the emails or WhatsApps like from past night, and you start working on some of the learnings that are really not any, they have no relationship with the job. And for me, one thing that I've personally in the last year been very keen to studying in is philosophy, especially Stoicism, from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, all these guys. And one thing that for me they learn, and it's very different than when you talk about philosophers, you always think about the academic guys that are like just reading and publishing papers. But philosophy back then was a way of life, was basically you incorporate the virtues. You're incorporating what you're learning on the day to day. And basically for me, that's one of the things, like you're trying to learn a little bit more every day. And for me, this is one thing that is there's so many great learnings that you need to read it like 30 times to like get 10% of the what they wrote like back then. And it's about learning, meditating, and implementing every. Yeah, so I was saying, so being a philosopher like 2,000, 3,000 years ago is basically lifestyle, right? So you learn and you implement that same day. It's not about like reading a book and like just writing novels or anything like that. So this is something that I try to incorporate recently in my life. Like adding to the meditation is really learning more about like great ways of like just becoming a better person and trying to implement every day. So it's really hard because you're always making mistakes, and I think this is going to be a lifelong journey. But basically, that's part of
I don't know if you know, but
I try to learn something
75
new
essays on
implement.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that's why we get along so well. You know, I don't know if you know, but I've written 75 essays on Stoicism, and it's just as such. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a whole there's a newsletter to 12,000 people called Stoic Capital. That then what's actually ended up becoming this whole inevitable platform. So yeah, I've written over 75 essays on Stoicism. I literally have a little statue of like Marcus Aurelius, and this is such a great gift. I'll give it to you. Next time we see each other, I'm coming to Brazil in November, I think. So this is like a little daily Stoic calendar that has like little like Marcus Aurelius like quotes. So the one for today is that don't be ashamed of needing help. You have a duty to fulfill, just like a soldier on the wall of battle. So so what if you're injured and can't climb up without another soldier's help? So Meditations, chapter 7.7, and that's interesting, right? Because I think you're
Nice. I didn't know that bit of it. I'm gonna read your essays. There's a lot of great books on that, like How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, of course, Marcus Aurelius. There's so many interesting materials. That's
here. Because I just moved, right? So I still have some stuff on the floor, but that's a quote from Seneca, which it's basically that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. It's one of my favorite quotes.
And also like the Marcus Aurelius life, it's a really recent one. So he went through a pandemic, so he had a lot of struggle in his life. He had health issues and like a lot of those things. And if you see the journal that he did is amazing, like very, very positive person and yeah, very, very down to earth and very conscious, like doing like daily routines, be closer to the family, to the children, his children. Yeah.
It's awesome. No, I love it. The nicest part about this whole podcast is just how much we learn about each other. Although like everyone that has been here, I've known for so many years. But it's the fascinating aspect of the human spirit. But with that, since we're already almost like an hour and 20 minutes in, wanted to wrap it up. And certainly thank you for your time, Adhemar. This was a wonderful conversation.
No, thank you, Pedro. Likewise, it's a great honor to be here, and it's a great honor to learn more about yourself. It's great to. These are the things that the dots connected and the synchronicity that you mentioned. There's so many other great examples of those things in life, and I think we just need to be very open and very aware of those things. And this again was a great podcast and a great learning experience for me too. Thank you so much for inviting me, and hope to see you soon in person back in Brazil in Miami.
Same, absolutely. Well, I no doubt that we'll see each other shortly, and thank you so much for your time, Adhemar.
Thank you so much, Pedro.
Yes. Yeah, and I hope you guys like this episode. For those watching on YouTube, we're available on all major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and so forth. Make sure to subscribe and see you on the next episode. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.